Okay, so what about recycling? Recycling is just the reprocessing of discarded materials into new useful products. So about 2/3 of aluminum cans are recycled. Old tires can be turned into road surfaces. Newspapers can become insulation. Recycling copper is super profitable. You can make so much money from recycling copper that people will actually steal wires, pipes out of people's houses if they're made out of copper. And this can cause major problems like gas leaks, explosions, and electrocutions. So this is an example of somebody with a lot of copper pipes. And this is an example of a house that no longer has its copper pipes. And an air conditioner where they've pulled all the copper wiring out. Some of these things you can make a lot of money off of. Obviously, you shouldn't. It's definitely wasteful to be pulling them off and causing all these problems. But some of these materials actually it makes a ton of sense to recycle, and you can actually make money off of it. So benefits of recycling: it saves money, raw materials, and landfill space. So it generally costs $35 a ton to recycle something as opposed to $80 a ton to take it to the landfill. Because of those tipping fees, you have to pay to take things to the landfill, right? So if it's cheaper to recycle it, then that's usually the more economically viable thing to do. This is one of the reasons why cities are entering into recycling programs. So the entire reason that Ruston decided to have a recycling service is because the landfill was so expensive. They were trying to divert some of their trash somewhere else so that it wasn't as expensive. It also encourages individual responsibility. Instead of just throwing things away and forgetting about them and not thinking about where they go, recycling is a way to do a little bit better than that. It also reduces energy consumption. It is definitely, especially for metals, it's uses much less energy and has much less of an environmental cost to recycle something rather than to go mine new metals. This is not necessarily true for all materials, but definitely for metals, it is always better to recycle. And it also reduces air pollution because degradation of things and the incinerators definitely are causing air pollution. So our current policies, governmental policies, actually favor the use of new raw materials because they're often sold very cheap to create jobs and stimulate the economy. Sometimes these things are even subsidized by the government, which makes an economic disincentive for recycling. So one thing you can do to help is by deliberately buying materials or products made out of recycled materials. So like deliberately buying recycled paper and things like that will help support the economics of recycling. This looks at US recycling rates. You can see that by far the thing that we do the best at recycling is auto batteries. So car batteries, those get recycled almost 100%. So that's really awesome. The next best things are steel cans and yard trimmings, which are a little over 60%. Paper is around 50%. Aluminum cans is a little under 50%. And then we see some of these other things. Our rates of recycling, most plastics are very low, but certain ones are easier to recycle. So plastic soft drink bottles and plastic HDPE, these are the two types of plastic that is most accepted by different municipal recycling programs. So not all cities accept all plastics. Some of them only recycle certain kinds of plastics, and so that's an important thing to know. And these are the types that most cities will take. You can see there's also low for recycling glass. Part of that is because many cities accept all of their recyclables all together in one big bin. And so if that's the case, glass is likely to break. And that creates hazards for the people handling it. And you could also have tiny glass shards mixed in with the other things you're trying to recycle, which is not ideal. It's also very heavy, so it takes a lot of fuel to haul glass around to get it to different recycling facilities. So not very many places recycle glass anymore. There is a place in New Orleans that has been recycling glass, and they're making it into new sand to help replenish beaches on barrier islands and help rebuild Louisiana's coastline. So there's some examples of some really cool ways that we're recycling glass. This looks at disposal method and how it has changed through time. And you can see that the amount of trash that goes to the landfill has kind of stayed even since the 1980s. We have increased our combustion of trash for energy recovery. We've increased recycling. We've always recycled a little bit, but the 1980s we saw recycling growing a lot more. And then we also see composting. There are starting to be cities that are doing municipal composting programs. In San Francisco, they actually mandate that you recycle and compost, and you can be fined for putting recyclables or compostable materials in your trash. So they've taken a pretty hard line trying to get it to be less waste. San Francisco is aiming to be zero waste in the next couple of decades. Many cities don't do that, but there are many places that are collecting compostables. So in New York City, they do have programs where you can drop off your compost, or there are certain neighborhoods where they will pick it up from different places. And, you know, the things that get compost, those are things like scrap fruits and vegetables, things like that. Usually not anything that has been eaten, definitely no meats, definitely nothing that's oily. That doesn't decompose very well. And they're also worried about pathogens. If you don't compost in a certain way, it doesn't get hot enough to kill any potential pathogens. So different composting facilities will accept different types of materials based on how they do their composting, which changes what the temperature ends up being and how well it can kill different pathogens. So a little bit more on recycling. One, America Recycles Day is coming up here on November 15th. The other is, I want you to know what these symbols mean. So this means that it's recyclable. It does not mean that it was made out of recycled materials. It means that it can be recycled. And there are different types of plastics, and so there's a different number in each one of these symbols, and that indicates what type of plastic it is. Most cities only take number 1 and number 2. Number 1 is abbreviated PETE, polyethylene terephthalate. And that's basically what, like, your soda bottles or your bottled water bottles, that's what this is. The number 2 is high density polyethylene. This is what a milk jug is, basically. And so most cities only take these two. In Ruston, they take all the things as long as it has a recycling symbol on it. They take it. They say they take straws. Most places don't take straws because they get stuck in the machinery and in the conveyor belts and things like that. So I'm a little skeptical as to how well they're able to recycle all of these things, because it means that somebody has to look carefully on each item to find the number and make sure it gets sorted properly. And my guess is they're probably not doing that. And number 6 is styrofoam or polystyrene, and that stuff can break into 4 bajillion pieces if you've ever broken styrofoam up. And so that's a really hard trash to deal with because it fragments so easily. It makes a big mess, and it's very light, and it's easily carried by wind and water. So that can be a problem. So don't buy anything with styrofoam as much as you can help it. But all of these things are recycled to different degrees. 1 and 2 is much more easily recycled, and you saw on the chart a few slides ago that the rates of recycling these are much, much higher than plastics as a whole. So commercial scale recycling and composting. You can compost yard waste. A lot of municipalities do this. Yard waste makes up about 12% of the waste stream. So many places will do that. In Ruston, I believe it gets burned, at least a lot of the larger pieces. I don't know if all of it, like the grass clippings, do, but any piece of wood that gets left by the street, I'm pretty sure gets burned. Construction waste can also be reused, refurbished, or repurposed. And so there's definitely a growing movement in buildings to reuse old pallets or old flooring from old buildings to make it useful again.